And welcome back to our third segment of the day here with Blair Hassler. We just brought up Trump in the last segment, and speaking of Trump, there has been a long ongoing story involving Russia, involving WikiLeaks, involving Hillary Clinton, involving James Comey, involving Miss Yates. I mean, this is just a cast of characters that keeps expanding, but please tell me your thoughts, Blair.
There's more characters. There's Flynn and everybody else. But I guess I
was trying to keep some of the secret villains for twists later.
Okay. I introduced my foil too early. No, my main thought on it right now is I'm still in fact gathering, wait and see. But as someone who is left of center, I find it to be a situation where I'm just waiting for the smoking gun. I don't feel like we've had one yet, and as close as I feel like there's a lot of premature celebration on the part of Democrats or even liberal news outlets whenever something occurs that is what I would consider evidence, but not a smoking gun.
Well, see,
I think that they have a party. And those of us down below that are rational liberals are looking at it and going, yes, this is the appearance of impropriety and maybe impropriety itself, but it is not a smoking gun. It is not damning.
Oh,
evidence.
see, we're at the appearance of impropriety. We're at the stage of Comey has been the bête noire of both parties. The enfant terrible to try and seem like a cultured asshole. Forgive my
best
language.
Idea.
Forgive my language, audience. Occasionally I do play a little bit blue and it does slip. But no, Comey has been in everyone's doghouse on both sides of the political aisle over the last, 18 months or so. I think that we are in a situation where credibility of the FBI had been dangerously eroded already by Election Day. We're in a situation now where we don't have any factual causal links, maybe proximal links, but not causal links, between the Trump campaign and collusion, or, oh my gosh, they're telling us they're going to hack Hillary's emails, and we're saying, yeah, go do that. Obviously, I'm assuming the players involved are smart enough that their hands aren't going to be dirty in that way, just in the same way that I think the Obama administration is sophisticated enough in its use of the deep state and intelligence agencies and embedded administrative officials to basically make the transition of power from the Obama administration to the Trump administration as slow and painful as possible for the Trump administration, where you basically are trying to take over an organism that's wrestling you back as you're trying to take it over.
I think some of that comes in some of the ideological stances that come out in these situations. If you have fundamental distrust of government and you're put in charge of government, you're going to have people within that thing that react in several different negative ways, none of which are going to allow for much functionality, even if that thing that is saying it's against government does want to then reach out and use that lever, it will not function the way it even would have for Obama, and it may be in a situation where the lever needs to be pulled. And so I'm somewhat hesitant to put too much blame on government for how that's sort of playing out.
Well, the picture I wanted to paint for you was one where everyone has done stuff that's shady, but done in a sophisticated enough manner that no one's going to get caught. But basically, it's both sides playing the same kind of shady game.
I think we saw that Hillary is more than willing to play any kind of dirty game.
Yeah,
that is available.
I don't want to. The game I'm trying to play here is not one of our hands are clean and yours are dirty. It's one of everyone's hands are dirty, and there hasn't been enough of a wind blowing one way or the other. So I'm basically going to wait until someone has a picture of someone with a gun in their hand and smoke's coming out of the end of the barrel.
That's it.
Yeah,
you never know how. What I think is that
it's like talking about other shootings or horrible acts in the country before you have all the facts.
Oh, truly.
And I know in this case, especially with a political investigation of this nature, it is going to take much longer for us to get the facts than it would in maybe a judicial proceeding, like if you were looking at Ferguson or any of the other, horrible instances, or the shooting in Dallas of the police officers, or, everyone has their preferred anecdotal horror story that makes the other side look terrible. But I don't want this show to be about that. What I want it to be about is us trying to come to some sort of agreement about what's going on, because I think our viewers are pulling their hair out trying to figure out, oh my gosh, who is telling me about what is actually going on? Who is telling me about what is going on in the world, not what they think about what is going on in the world? I think that is a hugely important distinction, that making spaces like this for people like you and myself to engage in the...
well, and thank you again for having me on. I appreciate
Hey, well, we can sit here and slap each other's back about how gracious and respectful we all are all afternoon, but then we won't get to the meat of the issue. But to get back to what I was saying, I just think it's important to build spaces like this where you can have a free exchange of ideas. But I'd sure like to hear your thoughts on the long rambling soliloquy I just engaged in.
I'm looking at this, and like you're saying, you're waiting for the smoking gun. What I feel like often the case is in these is that people are getting little bits of information, the things that Sally Yates says, and they're taking it, and they cannot wait to be the person or the group that said, I was right, we had the first thing, that we had the first nail in that coffin, or however you want to look. They want to be able to...
They're so invested in being right about the situation that they're going to interpret each new granule of news in such a way that most reasonably confirms their already held beliefs. Basically,
correct.
Every single pronouncement, whether it's something that they can construe, like an announcement from Comey or the Trump administration, that they can construe in such a way that makes them look terrible, they're going to construe it in all those ways. And I think this is why we end up talking past each other so frequently, is that we're too concerned with who's to blame. It's actually a critique of the American system.
The first to the poll system.
Well, no, of the American system, period, versus maybe a Japanese system, where I've heard the Japanese are much less concerned about who gets the blame as opposed to how to fix the problem. Whereas the Americans, with our kind of tabloid nature, our tabloid nature, we're really, really concerned with pointing a finger and kind of hanging someone in the stocks of public opprobrium.
That's one of those areas where I put it on the press a little bit. I feel like they engage in, and I mean, they're driven by market forces like everyone else, which is why, they say, we have to do what gets clicks, that we have to feed our kitty as well. But I look at it and I see the sensationalization of news, and I wonder if we don't need classic newsmen and women writing unbiased, somewhat not tasteless, but somewhat bland articles that, like you were saying, that are not so much opinion columns that we have nowadays, or so much that are not fitting it into a pre-existing conceptual framework that can only be read one way. It is, this is what happened, this is what was said, and we encourage our readers or viewers or whatever medium it's being conducted within, to continue to look in, and we will have updates throughout the day as we get them. But everything is tied to, like you're saying, this pre-existing conceptual framework.
Well, understanding granules of information within a larger tapestry of information. There's a greater context that you have to understand, that you have to be able to put those granules of information within to author a rational narrative.
Correct.
The problem is the rational narrative has been co-opted on both sides with a partisan narrative.
Correct.
I feel like if we were going back to Walter Cronkite and Edmund R. Burroughs and the days of the three news stations, we can talk about the credibility that afforded them and the ability that the public was able to rely on the media.
If you lost Cronkite, you lost America.
Yeah, it was almost a utility for Americans. They had to cater to such a wide swath of the American public that the information they provided had to be reasonable and be acceptable to all of those people. So naturally, the news product was something that could be broadly trusted, broadly digested by the American media consumer. Whereas today, when you have 9 million channels, 8 million different news channels, the internet, a million different blogs, Real Clear Politics, Politico, feeds. I mean, there's Twitter, there's so many different ways to get your news that no one knows who to trust anymore. In a world where everyone is telling a partisan narrative and no one has an incentive to tell you what's going on and not what to think about what's going on, I think it has become increasingly difficult for people to engage in the discussion about what's happening in their country. And I think that is a huge frustration right now.
I think so. And I look at that situation on both sides where I want data-reliant decisions. I'm somewhat of what people call mockingly a scientist. Like, no, I'm sorry, a fan of scientism. Well, not a scientist, but a fan of scientism. You understand
what I said earlier, though, about the whole cottage industry of think tanks.
Oh, absolutely. From the Heritage Foundation to the Clinton
Foundation. I approach many scientific
Foundation.
Studies with as much skepticism as I approach anything until I look at the methodology, until I looked at everything.
Correct.
Until you look at all the blind spots where the people constructing this problem would see things from any other point of view but their own.
Right.
If we want to talk about Jonathan Haidt and the Heterodox Academy and the problem that many people deciding what questions we ask about ourselves as a species academically are decided by people that come from one political viewpoint, and that naturally limits the kind of questions we ask and the kind of academic research we conduct. When you're not asking 50% of the questions that could be asked,
certainly.
It's worrisome that the quality of the research that comes out of that is as high as it would otherwise be if there were a more robust gauntlet of competing ideas.
I agree. Science doesn't tend to latch on to many things that fail. And so even if half the questions are getting asked, at least a lot of the bad questions are quickly dispensed with.
Well, and there's a difference between soft sciences and hard STEM sciences.
Correct.
If we want to talk about anthropology or, human gender underwater basket weaving, we can get into that. But you have to understand that there's a sliding scale of reasonable explanations for things that I think slides downward as you get more increasingly soft in the sciences. Now, if you want to talk physics with a physicist, I am more than happy to do so, and I am more than willing to trust all the things they are going to tell me about physics. But I need them to believe in my capacity as a smart voter, that I don't need them to tell me what to think about it, that they can present the argument to me and allow me to come to my own conclusion.
And I think that ability to critically think and trust others to critically think needs to be the basis for so much of what we do, both educationally, and I know that it is of primary concern to pedagogical and education researchers, is that critical thinking skill, and we need to expect it. We need to not soft serve our ideas and our politics.
Well, I think
the
bifurcation of our media environment requires it to have an understanding of what makes sense and to figure out what your narrative is, what's rational and reasonable, and makes sense to you in the cacophony of voices that is being broadcast at us daily. There's one last thing I wanted to get back to before the end of this segment. We were talking about James Comey earlier. I think the way this is going to be viewed is going to depend on how partisan and how ideologically bent the nominee for the head of the FBI will be. I've actually thought that it should be Merrick Garland. That would do a lot to maybe take some of the acrimony off the table.
It would do a lot for a rational liberal. There are going to be people that are always going to rail. But I think that would be
having him in a position where he
reach.
can actually be a prosecutor as the head of the FBI and has some prosecutorial discretion with investigations. I think that would go a long way to maybe soothe some feelings, although I think we're still going to be seeing these histrionics like we have. But we really are right up against it. But thank you for staying with us here for this third segment. We will be coming back in just a moment